Great.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's final session block for LEARNEast 2021. We're pretty excited. Today's gone well. Everybody's had some good feedback, and we're excited, or I'm excited this afternoon to introduce you to one of our program partners, Media Smarts, and joining us this afternoon from Media Smarts is Rebecca Boucher. Media Smarts are a wonderful organization, and we're very excited to partner with them for this. And as you saw, if you joined us for the unveiling of the ASD-W digital tools kit, then you know that they play a prominent role in that as well. So I'm not going to take any more time. Rebecca, I'm sure, will sing and dance appropriately, making media across the curriculum, an online course for K-12 educators. And I know there's going to be some exciting stuff because I just had a sneak preview of the third slide, and I liked it already. So, Rebecca, it's all yours. Have a great one.
Thank you. So hello, everybody, and thank you for attending this presentation on Media Smart's online asynchronous course entitled Making Media Across the Curriculum. Again, my name is Rebecca Boucher, and I have been the facilitator of the course since August of 2020. This presentation is going to give you some highlights from the course that include details about why it was created, as well as the barriers that media making faces in the classroom identified by Media Smart's research. The course runs in month-long sessions, with each of the 4 weeks following a specific topic or barrier. These are outlined for you in the bubbles at the bottom of the screen. Each week has its own guest lecture, discussion forums, and assignment for the participants to complete in order to be deemed a media maker expert at the end of the course. This section of the presentation will cover the rationale behind the course's creation, covering questions such as, why should I learn about media making as an educator? What are the positives of media making? And are there any barriers to media making in the classroom? There are so many benefits to making media in the classroom. Making media gives students a chance to demonstrate their learning by providing a vehicle for their creativity. It is important to remember that tech doesn't just have to be a job skill. Even if every student doesn't excel at every form of media, integrating it increases the number of pathways to success available. Making media can also give students a chance to show expertise you didn't know they had and take on leadership roles that you and they might not have imagined. Media making prepares students to be not just consumers, but producers of a media as well, and to therefore better understand how they can fit in that world as either one of those. Students who struggle with traditional assessments or who just aren't engaged with them can thrive when they get a chance to work in a medium they care about because they can communicate in a language that makes sense to them. Media making provides a bridge between the classroom and the world students live in when they're not in school, that so often involves different mediums of media, whether they're more advanced technologies or creative tools. A key part of media literacy is having students understand and appreciate the perspective that media texts are made objects and that every aspect of their design should be appreciated. Students understand this more and more as they're given the opportunity to create some themselves. Media making doesn't have to be all about technology, but it is a good way to teach it. Research has found that when teachers treat tech as a way of teaching and learning, instead of teaching it as a separate topic, they're more likely to integrate it in a lasting and meaningful way. The same is true of students. One study found they were more likely to feel confident with technology if they've learned about it through movie making than on its own. Making media is authentic learning because when students have to make a concrete product for an audience they care about, it makes the content more real and increases student engagement. The process of making media also gives them a chance to work in a way that's more like the world outside the classroom and let students approach abstract ideas or content in a concrete way. Unfortunately, even though there are so many positive consequences, teachers aren't likely to engage with media in their classroom, even though there is a push to integrate more technology into the class setting. Therefore, in order to push for more integration of media making into the classroom, MediaSmarts has identified the 4 biggest barriers that educators face when trying to integrate or make media in their classroom. These are creativity, technology, curriculum, and assessment. These barriers were identified in the research we did for the course, which included a survey of Canadian teachers that we did in collaboration with the Canadian Teachers Federation. These 4 barriers make up the 4 weeks of the course, with each week addressing one individually. The first barrier in the course, and the first barrier we will discuss in the presentation, is creativity. It is important to emphasize and remember that when we refer to creativity as a barrier, we mean teachers' and students' attitudes and beliefs about creativity, not students' own creativity. Creativity was identified as a barrier because, unfortunately, the curriculum doesn't reward it for all students across the board. Only some students are rewarded, which is worse than not rewarding it at all, as students can carry the message that they are not creative with them for the rest of their life. Yet every single student creates in their own way. Whether it's through the medium of Lego or TikTok, they are fabricating end products using their imagination. Some common myths about creativity include: it only exists in art subjects, it is only done independently, and that the end product must be entirely original. Educators can foster creativity in their own classroom. Some examples include imposing constraints to take away the fear of the blank page, or telling stories using the everyday then one day narrative. One of the practical ways that MediaSmarts suggests to overcome the different myths about creativity is the everyday then one day narrative format. This is an activity that involves writing a few short lines or a narrative following the specific format of the everyday then one day to show a break in a normal routine. The activity should eradicate the fear of the blank page in some students who do not know how to begin or what to write about, as everyone will have a routine that they can discuss that has been broken in one way or another. It can be linked across various subjects, either in chemistry as a story of how chemicals bond, or in history about the French Revolution. The purpose of this assignment is to show that creativity can be fostered in the curriculum in any subject, thus taking away the myth that creativity can only be done in art subjects, or that the end product must be entirely original, as all of the submissions will follow the same format and yet they are still creative. It might seem a very challenging feat to make media in the classroom without the obvious use of technology, but something like a flip book where you draw images on a notepad, then flip through them quickly to change a static image into a dynamic one is a great place to start. This is due to the low barrier to entry for flip books and stop motion, since the point is that anyone can be creative with a little structure provided. This idea is introduced by the guest lecturer for this topic in the course. Her name is Jessie Carell. She is the founder and director of Hands-On Media Education, which is a Montreal-based digital literacy resource center. She educates teachers how to incorporate digital literacy into their own classrooms. Jessie emphasizes that it's important to be active consumers of media and understand how it is made in order to increase students' media and digital literacy levels. She does this through the introduction of the medium of media stop motion, which is a series of images with a small movement in between each image that are then made into a video. This is used regularly in animation and cartoons. It is important to remember that the creation process does not have to include technology in order to be termed a media project. The end product could include a production on an iPad or something drawn on a Bristol board and still be a media project. By taking away the mandatory technology myth, creativity can be more easily linked to media without technological barriers, such as accessibility to new devices. I am now going to show you 2 clips from Jessie's guest lecture from our course. In the first clip, she explains what stop motion is in some more detail, and in the second, she shows us an example of a stop motion animation that has been made by students she has worked with in the past.
So what is stop motion animation? So this is an opportunity for students to create their own video using animation, which is a series of images with a small movement in between each image. So you may have seen a flip book, for example. This is a perfect introduction to stop motion animation, where a drawing is done, you flip the page, you redraw that same image with a slight change, like it's moved a little bit, and you continue to repeat that drawing. Again, small change, again, small change, again, small change. And then when you add speed, you get the movement. So an easier way to do that is with photography. Instead of redrawing, we're going to be moving a character and the image is taken again, move a character again, image is taken again, move it the size of an ant, take a picture again, and over and over and over and over and over again. It is very labor intensive, but as you can see in this photo, the students are young. We can do as young as 6 or 7, and it's it is really amazing how engaging this activity is and how committed they are. Even though it is such a labor intensive process, they really do stay focused and fixated on the mission, the task at hand, because there's immediate feedback. When they press play, they see their character moving. And we literally are creating magic. We are giving inanimate objects life. So we can animate clay characters like we're seeing in this image. We could also animate objects, a chair, a water bottle, a pencil, a human body. If you want to get into that, that's called pixelation. You can animate paper cutouts. You can animate sand. You can animate actual Lego characters that you make. So you're really creating magic. This really blends well to students' imagination. So as I say, we can go as young as 6. This is really easily adaptable to any classroom theme as well. Some of the curriculum links, English or French, language arts. You really can teach this using an ESL or FSL or any language acquisition activity. This is really great. Where students are, they're having to write out their story, which is a traditional literacy activity, and then they have to type out their title and their credits. They also are encouraged to speak, give their characters dialogue and a voice. And so they're practicing their language, if that's their first or second language, maybe their third. Media studies, this is obviously a media activity. They're creating their own media. Same with media literacy. They're learning how animation is made through the creation of their own. Computer studies, this is a perfect fit for that. History, you can adapt this to any kind of subject. For example, with history, I'll show you an example in a bit, where students were asked to recreate one scene of the Renaissance. So this is taking history and animating it. Same with math, right? You can do geometry, you can knit shapes. You can even post it online and see if it goes viral in the views, and chart over time how many views it got and what were the different effects and circumstances of that. And social studies. This can also be used with public service announcements, for example, with current events. So it's really applicable through a wide range of pretty much any topic. You could find a way to animate a segment of that. So that's that. Moving on to the third, this is a really powerful opportunity for self-expression, identity, and storytelling using an engaging blended learning media creation activity. So this is blended learning. This is a digital tool, the iPad or digital camera or Chromebook, and you're adding a tactile element, which is for me, I prefer modeling clay. They've got the tactile clay characters with the digital iPad or camera, and it just makes for a very engaging activity. This is also a chance for you to learn about your students and for them to learn about each other. So this is great for social and emotional learning.
And then just part of an example from Jessie's past student, she mentions it there with the French Renaissance. So this is just the beginning of it.
This one was the history lesson, recreating the Renaissance.
So again, just the beginning. Now dialogue can be added to that to make it more complicated. Again, just up to you and your cohort of students. So the second barrier in the course, and the second barrier we will discuss in the presentation, is technology. Technology is seen as a barrier to media making in the classroom, mainly due to lack of resources or a lack of confidence in using it in the classroom. It is important to remember again that technology is not precisely the barrier, but our attitudes towards it. Technology limitations can be an issue, but they're less of an issue once we can more accurately identify what our tech needs are. Technology as a barrier involves three different terms: the medium, the technology, and the tool. They all have different meanings and are used separately in media making activities. A medium is the form that the final product will take, whether that's a game, a video, or a comic. Each medium has its own distinct grammar, and the grammar refers to elements that go into creating the final medium, whether that's camera angles, edits, or your layout for creating comics. The medium will also hold a genre, such as a documentary, which helps to add some constraints to final products. The technology means how it is made, whether that's with a computer, a camera, or a pen and paper. The tools in simple technology are the same, such as a pen and paper, but they can also be more complicated, such as using the app Instagram as the tool to use the technology of disappearing photos. When assessing how to integrate technology into the classroom and what type, it is important to consider different elements of each medium. Seymour Papert, one of the founders of the constructionist learning theory, discussed an important concept whereby creative tools should have low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. Low floors refer to the immediate accessibility of the medium. This might mean that it could have grammar that students are already familiar with, and thus there isn't a large learning curve to start out with. A tool that has wide walls means that a lot of different things can be done with it. There are more possibilities. The downside of a tool with walls that are too wide is that there is the fear of the blank page, and thus some constraints are better than none at all. High ceilings refer to the idea that you can get better at what you're doing because there are more opportunities to create with the tool. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is more complex. It just means that students can make more complex use of the grammar of the medium. These three concepts are used in conjunction when assessing a tool and how well it might work for educators in their classroom for their specific cohort of students. Even though students are using technology very frequently in their personal lives, relatively little has changed in terms of using it in the classroom, due to the barriers teachers may feel personally about integrating mediums. These problems include two main ones: problems with access to technologies, whether that's a shortage of devices or problems with your Wi-Fi, and problems with using specific tools, which could point to a lack of teacher training. Now, these can be solved by using student-owned technology, which comes with its own concerns, or using technology sparingly in small groups. Various platforms that offer coding as an activity are a great way to integrate more technology across various subjects that might not traditionally fit into media making. Our guest lecturer for technology as a barrier, Brian Aspinall, discusses coding in more depth. So Brian Aspinall is an educator and best-selling author in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics education, or STEAM. His books include Codebreaker, Block Breaker, Risk Taker, and Think Like a Coder. A key concept in Brian's lecture is that you can learn to code so you can code to learn, just like learning to read so you can read to learn. He believes that coding can be used across the curriculum to communicate concepts in math, such as quadratic equations, all the way to arts with the creation of creative graphics. Brian mentions 10 reasons why students should code. Some of these reasons include: coding helps students visualize abstract concepts and lets them apply math to real-world scenarios. And students who code understand the value of planning, which results in better writing skills. He mentions some tools such as Scratch and Minecraft that allow teachers to use minimal prep work to use and create inside of their classroom. I am now going to show you a short clip from Brian's guest lecture on week 2 of the course. In this clip, he is speaking about how he has used coding in his own classroom to teach problem ability by linking various strings of math into one activity that involved a lot of student engagement?
Traditionally, when teaching probability, I would have students flip coins. In grades 7 and 8, we have to explore experimental probability and theoretical probability. So in theory, flipping a coin is 50-50. It's either heads or it's tails. But when you experiment with that and you run the simulation once or twice or 3 times, it doesn't come out to be 50-50. So it's really difficult to teach the law of large numbers to 13-year-olds when you have loonies and quarters flying around the room. But essentially, traditionally, I would want them to flip it 3 times. And it might be 100% heads or 33% heads or 66% heads. And I would say, okay, now go back and flip it 20 times. And I knew they weren't. They were pretending to flip it 20 times. And they're like, oh yeah, whatever you say. We got 12 out of 20. And they were just picking numbers arbitrarily. But I didn't know how else to teach probability until these applications came out. So this student coded a simulator that flips a coin every time he touches the coin. And the program will determine what face or costume lands on the screen. And the program will then tally how many times the coin has flipped. And the program will tally how many times it has landed on heads. And the program will also tell you the experimental probability. So now instead of just filling out a T-chart, they're using principles of algebra, because those are variables, and they're using principles of geometry while they're learning about probability. So it's across strands of math. This student took his code and he put it into a loop. And so that turbo button is attached to a loop. And if you push the turbo button, the program will ask you, how many times would you like to flip this coin? And you can enter any number you want. So for fun one day, 10 o'clock in the morning, they said, let's put in 1,000,000. And I said, I'm game. I want to see if the computer can do it, and I want to see the experimental probability. So his program was really, really, really fast in a really short period of time. So this piece of technology has allowed me to teach the law of large numbers rather effectively. It didn't make it to 1,000,000 by the end of that day. It only made it to 700,000, but they cared enough to come and look at every opportunity they could to see what it was at. And it got to about the 9th decimal place. They were both 50% decimal 0.00000, some other number at the end. I thought it was pretty cool.
The third barrier in the course, and the third barrier we will discuss in the presentation, is curriculum. Curriculum is seen as a barrier because media is not in the curriculum expectations in most subjects, and there is so much in the curriculum that there is not enough time to integrate media making, which points to the problem of crowded curriculums. The crowded curriculum means that most teachers feel overwhelmed at the prospect of adding more to their already busy days. Yet research has found that, especially in primary or junior grades, it's a great idea to do media projects that touch aspects of various subject areas. There are ways to overcome or help the barrier of an overcrowded curriculum. One thing to remember with media making is that students should be given authentic projects that engage them, as when they are engaged, they put more effort in, thus resulting in a better end product and more learning. Papert coined this idea projects that are hard fun. Hard fun is when student tasks are fun and challenging, something which media easily adopts. A great idea is for students to make media that they enjoy as consumers, which could be utilizing social media or TikTok in some way, usually in secondary classrooms. When making media, it is important to consider a student's internal and external motivations. External motivations are to do with grades as a factor that pushes students to work hard and do better, but can be less motivating for students compared to their internal motivations, which could be having a sense of control and choice, or being able to accurately assess their own performance. Ways to overcome the barrier that media is not in most subjects' curriculum. So we suggest to not think about the content, but rather what it is you want your students to do. And just like an essay where it serves as a vehicle for ideas, media can serve as a vehicle for course content, such as flipbook animation being used to assess how to work out linear equations. Kathleen Mercury, the guest lecturer for the Barrier of Curriculum, introduces the media making activity of tabletop games as a great way to integrate one activity that adopts several concepts in the curriculum. Kathleen Mercury is a gifted teacher in St. Louis, Missouri. She teaches tabletop game design, RPG or role-play game design, cosplay, filmmaking, debate, humor, and everything else where she can have students create original work that is full of collaboration with their peers. She believes game design should be taught in every classroom because it develops analytical, practical, and creative thinking skills while providing autonomy over design choices. The end product involves a lot of collaboration, which students get to play and test the games together. She teaches gaming literacy before students start to create their own games so that they can develop more complex and creative end products. Ultimately, the more gaming literacy students hold, the better games they will make. She has students research games, create prototypes, play test and receive feedback, and integrate material across all subjects into their games. Kathleen mentions that the technologies that can be used could be paper and pens or a more advanced software such as Adobe. So I'm now going to show you 2 excerpts from Kathleen's guest lecture on week 3 of the course. The first video answers the questions, what is gaming literacy and should it be taught? And the second shows you examples of tabletop games made by Kathleen's past students.
So what is game design and why should it be taught? Game design requires students to create an idea for a game, design a prototype, test it, determine the success of the test through given feedback, and repeating this process until it's done. And just for clarification, we make tabletop games. Now, many video game design courses offer tabletop game design classes much like this as a foundation to the digital work. So if you have students who are interested in video game design, just make sure they know the process is the same, it's just the medium looks a little bit different. Why do I teach game design? First, it develops analytical, practical, and creative thinking skills. It provides autonomy over design choices, but also collaboration for improvement during playtesting and feedback. It's authentic and real world. They really do make games. And it teaches oneself empathy for ourselves and others as we learn to accept unfinished work and to see success and incremental progress. And remember, this applies to us as teachers too, not just as students.
And now the next video is showing a couple examples from her past students.
So here's some examples of games that my students have made. So if you look at these games, you see a wide variety of themes. There's different types of choices. There's different types of goals for players to play in the game, different types of materials for them to manipulate. And it doesn't take much for students to develop the gaming literacy skills that they need to go from games that look like Candyland and Chutes and Ladders to this.
So the fourth and final barrier in the course, and the fourth barrier that was identified, is assessment. So educators see this as a barrier for 3 main reasons: due to a lack of confidence in their own media making abilities, because they're afraid of squashing student creativity, and because translating media projects into grades is a hard prospect. Assessing media projects, although not mandatory, is very beneficial for student progress so that they can learn to do better next time. It also means students will take the project more seriously if they know a grade will be attributed to it at the end. And because media projects are usually quite arduous, it means teachers will get better end results overall. But making media is also good for assessment because it can let students show what they know in a language they understand. For many students, it will actually be easier to demonstrate their knowledge or competence in a medium they're familiar with than in a way they've only learned in a school context, like in an essay or a lab report. When assessing media, it is important to question why educators are assessing and what they are going to do with the assessment. They should also consider what type of feedback they are giving to their students, whether it's descriptive, formative, or evaluative, with the first being more beneficial for most students' learning. Educators ultimately need to set the goal for their assessments to tell them something new about their students, not something they were already aware of. Formative assessments are very successful in media making as they allow teachers to assess at different stages and make sure that students aren't getting caught up in their technology being perfect rather than communicating the course content needed to succeed in their assessment. If you are doing summative assessments, the question is, what content or skills are students expected to demonstrate, and how well can they use the grammar of the medium to show those? When choosing a technology or tool for students to use in their assessments, teachers need to consider what part of the task it automates, or black boxes, as Mitchell Resnick coins it. Black boxes should only automate parts of a project you don't want to assess, such as a comic maker that gives you pre-made graphics would be fine for a history project, where what matters is that you can communicate your understanding of a historical event, but not for an art project, where it actually matters whether or not you can draw. This guest lecture for this barrier is delivered by Jason Weiser, who has over 20 years experience being an animator and artist. Jason's work has appeared in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, on Disney shows, and on robots at MIT. He has taught masterclasses at Pixar Animation Studios and courses at Harvard and Tufts universities. During the pandemic, Jason wanted to raise funds for his favorite comic book store, as well as offer positive engagements for kids, and so he created a course in comic book design for ages 8 and up. His guest lecture goes into details about this course. Comics are a purely creative medium that require relatively little tools, as they really only need a piece of pen and paper. Jason mentions that comics allow students to express themselves more freely without the constraints of text. They also transcend language barriers and communicate emotional narratives. He goes through the different technologies of comics or how they are made, such as how to read them according to their panels, and emphasizes that it's important that educators go over this first before having students create them in their classroom. This is the grammar of comics. The assessments in Jason's course include a lot of positive, formative verbal feedback that allows students to feel more secure in their creation process with making media in the classroom. So I'm now going to show you one final video pertaining to Jason's guest lecture on the course. The video goes into detail on why comics should be taught in the classroom as a form of collaborative media making.
Comics as an expressive medium have a lot to offer. Comics can be created with minimum supplies or preparation, just paper, pencil, and pen. Comics allow visually minded students to express their ideas more easily than if they are limited to only text. Comics can transcend language barriers, consider airline and Lego instructions, and can be exceptionally effective at communicating emotional narratives. They offer the opportunity for students to create very personal stories on their own, and also for those students to be mindful of their reader's experience. And comics also can provide exciting opportunities for collaboration between peers or in groups.
So I thought it would be an interesting idea for everyone here to try their hand at the assignment from week one that we discussed earlier on in the presentation, the creativity section. So I'm going to refresh your memory a bit in case anyone's forgotten. So the assignment at the end of the first barrier on the course for creativity is for participants to write a short narrative that fits into the everyday, then one day narrative format. This constraint imposed on students eradicates the fear of the blank page and allows them to describe a daily routine that has been broken. The purpose of this assignment is to show that creativity can be fostered in the curriculum in any subject, thus taking away the myth that creativity can only be done in art subjects or that the end product must be entirely original, as all of the submissions follow the same format and yet they are creative. So I'm going to show you some examples first, in case anyone doesn't know where to begin. So these are 2 examples from past student work on 2 different sessions of the course that ran last year. So the first one relates to trade agreements between Canada and the US, and the second refers to historical knowledge pertaining to Indigenous peoples and European settlers. So the first one reads, every day there was a small country named Canada. Canada wanted to find someone who would trade freely with them. One day, Canada went to their friend, the United States. Canada asked if the United States wanted to trade freely, and they did. Now they trade freely all day long. So you can see every day, one day. Every day shows the normal routine, and then one day is that break in that routine, which changes the narrative. And then the second example, every day, First Nations people would hunt, fish, farm, and forage for their survival. Their values and traditions were based on their belief that everything came from the Creator. They lived in harmony and were able to satisfy all of their material and spiritual needs through the resources of the natural world around them. Then, one day, the Europeans arrived. So again, every day, then one day. Now, this one doesn't have that many lines after one day. It doesn't go into detail about that break in the routine. And either format work perfectly as long as there's that clear break in the routine. So I'm going to leave this slide up for maybe around 3 minutes for you to try to create your own short narrative about anything. Now, this can be about a subject you teach or have taught, or that you participate in a school setting, or a routine that you follow every day that could break in a fictional way, whether that's walking your dog and that routine breaks in a made up way. So if you would like to share afterwards, please go ahead and you can paste it into the chat box, or if you want to read it out loud, that would be fantastic as well. So I'm just going to leave this around 3 minutes here, just if anybody wants to try their hand at it, and then maybe we can hear some of them, which would be great. And you don't even have to write it down if you don't want to. If you can memorize 3 quick lines, then that's fine as well. It's just something to try out a sample of the course. And we get lots of interesting submissions when I go through and read them, the assignments every week. They're really interesting to read about the different subjects people teach, or again, just a simple routine they follow. And some of them are quite humorous as well. If you would like to read it out loud, I think we'll wait while the end, just to make sure that people aren't speaking over one another, if anybody wants to. And I can't see your faces right now because I'm looking at the PowerPoint, but at the end I will be able to, if you would like to. So just 1 more minute here before we move on. Okay, I'm going to move on from this now. I can go back to this slide after if anybody wants to, if you need to see the instructions again, or if that's okay, then we don't need to as well. So the takeaway from this course is that media making should be essential in every classroom in order to foster creativity, collaboration, and technological skills. The 4 barriers we have identified, which are creativity, technology, curriculum, and assessment, that most educators feel stops them from integrating more media into their class setting, can be overcome through the suggested activities such as tabletop games or comics, and through more seamless integration to cover various course objectives. Media does not have to be a static activity to tick a technology education box, and it is not a prescriptive activity, as it can be adapted to be the vehicle you need to use in your classroom. This vehicle is going to be different for every educator based on their class's needs. And this highlights the versatility of media making as a concept. You do not have to be an expert to use media in the classroom, but rather know the basics on how the medium as a whole is used to communicate. Making media carries a lot of positive consequences, and we really urge you to try to integrate it in your classroom in small ways as soon as you can. So if anybody is wondering, our next course dates, so all of this content is going to be seen in the course in more detail in videos and discussion forums, as I stated, and through the assignments like the one that you potentially tried a couple minutes ago. Now, this course is running again from October 25th, which is the start of our Media Literacy Week at Media Smarts, and it's going to run for 4 weeks ending on November 19th. So after the presentation, I will put the English and the French event links because it also does run in French if anybody would prefer that. We have a French media education specialist, Mac, and he runs that course. Now I will put those links into the registration box and you can register. There is a fee attributed to the course. It's $50 for teachers and $25 for teachers in training. We get a plethora of people. We get teachers in training, elementary school teachers, TAs, secondary school teachers, and we also get post-secondary school TAs and professors as well. So a large array of people with fantastic opinions and insights, and a lot of discussions arise from the course that I find incredibly interesting as a facilitator to read, and I learn a lot from the participants, just like I hope that they learn a lot from the course itself. And to just change the topic for a second, I wanted to discuss something while I have you here, because we constantly conduct research at Media Smarts, and we're constantly looking for people to help us with this research who work in education as educators. So this first one that I will talk about, there's going to be two just really quickly, is a new classroom resource called My Voice is Louder Than Hate, and it empowers youth to push back when they encounter hate online. Now, we are currently seeking feedback from teachers and students in grades 9 and 10 as we finalize the development of this multimedia platform and accompanying teacher resources and lesson plans. So if anybody knows of anyone or they themselves would like to pilot and evaluate My Voice is Louder Than Hate, the resource, please contact our Director of Research, Cara, and I will put her email into the chat box. You can send her a quick email and she'd be more than happy to put your name into the pilot, which would be great. And the second one quickly, so we are constantly conducting studies at Media Smarts with our ongoing research, and we are in phase 4 of our Young Canadians in a Wireless World. Now, this is a quantitative study that tracks experiences, attitudes, and opinions of children and youth across Canada with respect to their use of the internet and digital technology. So phase 4 will continue in fall 2021 with classroom surveys, and we're specifically looking for grades 4 to 11. So Media Smarts has approval for the Anglophone West School District, and we are now looking for schools to participate. So if you are interested in participating in phase 4 of Young Canadians in a Wireless World, please contact our Research and Evaluation Associate, Samantha, and I will also put her name underneath. I'm also going to mention that Matt McGuire is our contact at the district, and he does support participation in this study. So I'm going to put the 2 links for the course, and then I'm going to put those 2 emails into the chat box if anybody is interested whatsoever in participating. Now, I'm going to open up to questions. I would also like to take this time. Anybody who would like to share? I'm very curious. I would love to hear your narratives that you might have written really quickly or memorized really quickly, whatever works for you. But if you have any questions that you maybe don't feel comfortable asking in a public format, or that you have forgotten because there was so much content, or that you're going to think of afterwards, please email info@mediasmarts.ca, and I will do my best to answer those questions in more detail in a written format, whether you need to see that written as well. So that does conclude my presentation and the info on our Making Media across the curriculum as a course. So if, again, questions or comments or your narratives, I would like to go ahead and open up the floor to that.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And before people want to share their narratives, we'll sort of wrap up and then stop the recording. So their narratives aren't shared with the world.
Okay, yeah, good idea.
But thank you so much. And if you have a narrative to share with Rebecca, I put mine in the chat. And in fact, my daughter, who so lovingly gave me that grandchild is here. Tiffany is here right now. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing of your time and your expertise today. Just a reminder to everybody that was here, if you do want to participate in the course, and the $50 fee is a barrier, there is funding available through the MBTA for any professional learning that you want to do. And so you can reach out to the MBTA. It's available on the website. You just put in a simple little application form and they will cover the cost of any of that. So that's really great as well. So don't let cost be a barrier for anything that you may want to do. So thank you so much, Rebecca. I'll leave the team, the meeting open so people can chat with you, or you can chat with them. But I will stop the recording now just so that all of that doesn't get recorded. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.